Well, a very warm welcome to this workshop, Heart Edge workshop, exploring how pilgrimage is changed by a pandemic. It's really wonderful to welcome you all this evening or whatever time it is at the hour in which you are listening to this. Heart Edge is an international ecumenical movement for congregational renewal in the broad church. And this workshop is part of our Living God's Future Now program, which is an online festival of ideas and practice and theology, all about mission in the area of the 4 C's, mission in the area of commerce, compassion, culture, and congregational renewal. And throughout history, pilgrimage has been a pathway to spiritual renewal. And pilgrimages can be an outward journey to places of spiritual significance, such as the Holy Land or Scotland or Canterbury, and many other places. They're also an inward journey of renewal of the spirit, enabling people to journey deeper in knowledge of themselves, in knowledge of others, and in knowledge of God. And during this recent pandemic, many pilgrimage organizers have been forced to dramatically rethink how to recreate pilgrimage experiences online. And there have been unexpected joys and unforeseen challenges to this whole process. And tonight, to discuss these experiences, we have a wonderful panel this evening of people who spend their days organizing pilgrimages. Longtime Episcopal priest, Reverend Dr. Donald Fishburne will kick us off this evening. He regularly leads groups on faith pilgrimages and helps other pilgrimage hosts plan and lead fruitful group travel and spiritual experiences through EO Travel. And he and his wife, Sarah, recruit hosts and speakers on a variety of pilgrimages. Donald has led online spirituality small groups, such as our Lenten journey through the wilderness toward a resurrection, which does also feature virtual pilgrimage of elements. So there's Donald. And then there's Reverend Heather Prince Doss, who is with us this evening. Thank you, Heather, for being with us. She's the owner of Progressive Pilgrimage and regularly leads spiritually minded trips to the Holy Land, Ireland, Scotland, and Europe. She's a pastor of Eliot Presbyterian Church, a multicultural congregation in Massachusetts. And Heather has been traveling since birth and loves to help people experience God and deepen their faith by encountering new places, peoples, and cultures through travel. So welcome, Heather. And then, of course, there's Eugene Ling, a friend and member of St. Martin in the Fields congregation. He's organised the annual pilgrimage to Canterbury for the Connection at St. Martin in the Fields since 2014. He's also a member of our congregation. And this 4-day, 74-mile pilgrimage from St. Martin in the Fields to Canterbury Cathedral normally involves about 120 pilgrims and volunteers each year. In 2020, it was replaced by a virtual pilgrimage, which involved 44 virtual pilgrims all over the world, walking for over 2,800 miles, and all raising money for our homeless work at the Connection at St. Martin's. So tonight we will hear a little from each of these contributors. There'll be some discussion between them, and then over to our attendees for your questions and answers. And please be putting them in the chat as we go. And if you could remain on mute until the moment in which I invite you to speak your question, then that would be wonderful for our recording, which will be available for people to hear after this event. So, with no further ado, I will hand over now to Donald. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Catherine. It's a real pleasure for me to be with you. I appreciate getting to know Heart Edge more deeply and more broadly, and to be participating in more Heart Edge events. And it's good to be with Catherine and Eugene. I'm especially glad to be in the same room, as it were, with Heather, another pilgrim leader, and with thanks to Ben and other members of your team at St. Martin's and Hard Edge. Sarah, my wife, and I have have traveled a great deal with EO Tours. It was originally founded by a Methodist pastor nearly 50 years ago for essentially Methodists in the U.S. to make pilgrimage to the Holy Land. That was the founding principle, and that is still part of the ministry of this organization. James Ridgway's son is the president these days, and was, as a matter of fact, very lately in the Holy Land, just at the outbreak of the terribly unfortunate and tragic and deadly conflict. And we are all praying for a peace that holds there and for resolution for the future. With that said, EO Tours has branched out, of course, as most pilgrim companies or support organizations have done. I've done work taking Americans and others to Cuba to visit the Episcopal Cathedral and Bishop of Cuba, Iona, Anglican Heritage, sites in Europe, and of course heavily Rome, Italy, the Holy Land, Palestinian territories. We sometimes invite or recruit or encourage clergy or lay leaders from congregations to head these pilgrimages on which they themselves are speakers. We also, of course, provide guides and transportation, and the local guides add a great deal to these pilgrimages. We also, from time to time, can have on board with us on a cruise or on pilgrimage a speaker, for instance, Peter Walker, who wrote in the steps of Jesus, in the steps of Paul, Oxford, Cambridge educated author and scholar. And an engaging speaker. So we have a variety of opportunities for people to hear from their own clergy, to hear from themselves in pilgrimage together, as we learn from each other as we travel and make pilgrimage together, and also outside resources. I'd like today, as we think about post-pandemic pilgrimage and how it's different, how it may be different from 2 years ago, to think and to compare a pilgrim group to a congregation. That is, let's say a pilgrim group emerges from a congregation, goes on physical pilgrimage. Is there a way to connect that pilgrimage to members of the congregation so that, in one sense at least, not everyone is left behind? That is, let's say a band of 20, 30 members of a parish or a cathedral go on pilgrimage, and there's been a run-up in the run-up to that, an adult forum, an educational series, a spiritual formation series that includes not only those making the real pilgrimage, but also those who will be on board through a virtual pilgrimage with them, checking in for morning and noonday and evening prayer, perhaps, receiving dispatches, reports back, and Facebook posts and photos, that sort of thing, so that family and friends and other parishioners actually make pilgrimage with you. I think we're seeing more of that as we emerge from the pandemic, and as pilgrimage begins to be open to more and more people. So the pilgrim group is, of course, part of a congregation. We might also, to just take a leap here, think about what about those who would make a Bible Land cruise or would make a Journeys of Paul cruise. I tend to say those places to which Paul went and would have wanted to go rather than go to prison. So when we have a Mediterranean cruise, Greek Isles cruise, a Journeys of Paul cruise, that pilgrim group is a subset of everyone on board that ship, let's say. So the pilgrim group is also within community. What I'm hoping, and I believe we're seeing, is that as we begin to rebuild cruises and pilgrimage groups, the cruise lines, the tour operators, the governments are necessarily being more careful and more proactive in terms of safety, health, well-being, so that actually I'm confident that as we find our way together, those in the tourism industry and in the pilgrimage, I don't like to call it business, but in the trade of pilgrimage, will work with governments and operators and airlines and cruise lines so that there really is a sense of community and of community well-being. So again, pilgrimage groups can be a part of a congregation, and of course in congregations in our churches, we're very keen on the well-being of everyone. If we can take some of that with us and work in cooperation with authorities and others while we're on pilgrimage, perhaps it'll be to the betterment of the larger community as well as to our pilgrim band. So I hope some of that might make some sense to you. Just a word about EO in particular. EO Tours based in the U.S. Is, according to the Ministry of Tourism in Israel, the organization that brings the most pilgrims, Christian pilgrims, that is to say, to the Holy Land from the States and from Mexico and from around the world. So it's a large enterprise, but it considers this work ministry, and we work with groups from 6 to 16 to 26. The largest group in which I participated was a group of 400. That's a completely different experience and is unusual. Many of us would love to be in a band of 6, 16, 26, 36 on pilgrimage. There are at this moment 12 staff members of EO Tours in Israel and Palestinian territories. They've just returned. The president of the company and several other key folks was actually on the ground in Jerusalem when the hostilities broke out, stayed for a time, got out safely, and so we have more information at our fingertips than we might have wanted to have had. But at any rate, it's a good thing that we have staff members in the Holy Land, and we also, of course, maintain relationships wherever we are on most continents. Not to take too much more time, but I think by way of introduction and leading off, how are faith pilgrimages being changed for the better? And I believe it can be for the better as we together make progress post-pandemic. Even here in the States, I live on the East Coast of the US, and in the Southeast, and I'll be soon moving to the coast of Maine because it gets hot where I am at the moment, so we summer in Maine. The number of visitors to the coast of the US now is really taking off. Memorial Day weekend just finished for us, and so summer season is upon us. As people have double vaccinations, as protocols are followed, the number of visitors, just not pilgrims necessarily, but tourists to the coast is really accelerating. The length of stay in hotels is accelerating, and the price of those hotel rooms is accelerating. So you see there's this pent-up demand in the States, and I'm sure this would likely be true on the coast of England, coast of Ireland. There's this pent-up demand. I think we as pilgrim leaders have an opportunity to use Christian care and to care for our folks and to not be caught up in a sort of wave, but rather be very careful and deliberate in where we travel, when we travel, how we travel, and a sense of well-being first, spiritual well-being, physical well-being, and so on. I'd like to talk a little later, and I'm sure Heather will be speaking about how we prepare our congregations for pilgrimage, how we invite people, what are some challenges these days, and then, of course, to speak about virtual pilgrimage. But I'm sure that's enough of my words for now, at least. Thank you.
Wonderful, Donald. Thank you very much indeed for kicking us off so richly. Perhaps we can now turn to Heather. Welcome, Heather, from Massachusetts.
Yes, hello, welcome to all of you. It is really good to be with you all today, and I'm just sort of looking through your little boxes here on the top of my top of my screen to see who's here. As Catherine said, I am the owner, the founder of Progressive Pilgrimage. We're a small travel company here in the United States, and I started the business because I wanted to travel with my congregation differently than I had seen it done before. I did some work when I was in seminary on issues related to peace in Israel, Palestine, and I wanted to take a group from my congregation, but I wanted a trip that would speak to our spirituality as mainline Protestants. And it seemed like most of what I was finding that was religious travel was either Roman Catholic or evangelical, and that just didn't feel like the right fit for my congregation. And also I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to hear from a variety of different voices with the political issues in Israel. And I wasn't sure when I started dig into tour companies, the religious ones seemed to want to not deal with politics at all, or there was a really heavy bias politically. And I wanted my folks to be able to hear a lot of different kinds of voices. I don't know that I was thinking of the word pilgrimage when I started to plan that trip, just that it had been a part of the world that was precious to me, and it's precious to people of our faith, and I wanted to share it with my congregation. So I just organized it using a partner in Israel, an ecumenical institute called Tantur. If you ever have a chance to go to Jerusalem, I really recommend Tantur as a place to, if you're traveling solo, as a home base. It's a beautiful community right on the border of Jerusalem and Bethlehem. So it's a great place to be. But it was a huge success. My congregation, just the people who went, we took 30 people. They were richly blessed by the experience. And so then when I was looking to move on to another call, I was feeling called to urban ministry. I suspected that the church I would end up serving might not be able to afford a full-time pastor. And so I started to think about what else could I do that would still be connected with ministry, that would allow me to work for the kind of church I wanted to work for, but might give me some other options for my contributions to my family's well-being. And so that's why I started with my husband. We kind of do most of our stuff is together. We started Progressive Pilgrimage in 2015, and we've been growing until the pandemic. We were looking for 2020 to be our best year yet. And of course, that unfortunately caught us off guard like it did many people. So but we've pushed through. We've been grateful for our wonderful, wonderful travelers who have just encouraged us and supported us in the past year. And we really, as Don said, are seeing a ton of pent-up demand. There's this huge urge to travel. And we too are thinking about how to do that sustainably. I see so many communities where tourism takes a place that was beautiful and just runs right over it. And we are trying not to contribute to that with the way we do our pilgrimages. So that's kind of the story of how we got started. Like I said, I hadn't really thought about pilgrimage as a concept. I've always traveled. My parents were in the Air Force in the United States, so we moved around a little bit and then took advantage of the travel benefits that come from being in the armed forces in the United States. I was born in Germany. Some of our closest family friends are German folks, and my parents have always just made sure my sister and I have had access to the world, which has been great. But then I'm also a person of faith. And so as I started thinking about how to bring those two together, I sort of discovered pilgrimage and have been really grateful for that. I think even before the pandemic, but especially since the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what pilgrimage means, not just in terms of travel, but in terms of a posture or like a way of being. So when we prepare our travelers, one of the things we send them is a short article that I wrote called Introduction to Pilgrimage. And it just introduces some pilgrim values like openness, simplicity, community, hospitality. And so when the pandemic set in and we couldn't do those things while we were traveling, I started to think a little bit more, or to put into words a little bit more, how we live out those values all the time. And the pandemic certainly has been a time of uncertainty. We've been traveling in unfamiliar terrain for the last year and a half. And we've tried to invite the people who are already connected with us to think about that. As we were entering that pandemic, we could see that this was going to be different. And once we figured out it wasn't going to be over in 4 or 6 weeks, how do we approach this from a posture of pilgrimage? How do we simplify in ways that allow us to be more connected to God and more connected to our neighbors? How do we be open to the experiences that this pandemic brings us? How do we even welcome things that might be uncomfortable? And how do we live in community? One of the great things about a traveling pilgrimage, if you do it right, is that you have to rely on other people. you have to, I say you have to, eventually somebody's going to have to ask if somebody else has Imodium. It just happens, right? And we just know when we travel as pilgrims that we need to rely on the other people in our band. And so how could we walk through this pandemic embracing that value of community and hospitality? So those are some of the things that we've tried to invite people to think about during the pandemic. Even if you're not going anywhere, how do you bring these values of openness and simplicity and community into your daily living? And when you do that, your trip to the grocery store could be a pilgrimage. If you leave your house with the mindset, with the posture of a pilgrim. And certainly we want to do that when we travel in real life. Post-pandemic, how will pilgrimage be different? I think a lot of us are hoping it won't be that different. We are so eager to travel. But the reality is, I think we will see smaller groups for a while. And like Don said, most of us will welcome that. We would like to travel with a smaller group of people rather than with 50 or 400. But I think part of the reality of that too is it can mean the cost is a little bit higher, which is more prohibitive for people. The cost of your coach doesn't go, you're dividing, there's so many costs that you're dividing among the whole group. And when the group is smaller, it means the cost per person is going to be higher. So it might be, churches might need to think about if they can help underwrite the cost of pilgrimage, if folks are going to travel so that it's not an exclusive activity. For us, I don't know if this is Don's experience, but we're not doing we haven't done a lot of like camping or hostel type pilgrimages. We're mostly traveling with adults over 55 who are done sleeping on floors and in dorm rooms. So we're, hotels and things. So those, if we need to keep costs down to make pilgrimage accessible, I think thinking about how to make sure folks have the opportunity to participate in ways that maybe don't ask too much of them in terms of their physical comfort, but also challenging people maybe to be willing to be a little bit physically uncomfortable if it's not dangerous. Also, we're still sort of waiting to see. One of the values of pilgrimage that we try to include even in our group trips is flexibility and openness, being able to accept invitations that are offered, adjusting well to changes in schedule, not needing to be in control all the time. Obviously, that's harder the larger your group is. But I think as pilgrimage, as travel reopens, it's going to be even harder to do that. We're expecting that more and more places will require advanced reservations or ticketing so that you can't just sort of show up. I know in the Holy Land, it's a little different in Ireland, but in the Holy Land, most things you don't need an appointment. Even with a group of 50 people, you can just show up and stand online to go onto the Haram al-Sharif, the Temple Mount. And I'm wondering if that will be changing, if more and more things will have to be scheduled in advance, even in places where in the past you had a lot of flexibility. So we're just kind of watching that and making adjustments as needed. We, of course, are expecting that vaccines will be required for many countries. In Israel, it is most definitely required to be vaccinated. So I expect that that will be the case across Europe as well, although I know the EU is still wrestling with how to handle that because of freedom of movement in the EU. I'm sorry, I have my dog at home. He's barking. So those are some of, like, in terms of actual travel, I think smaller groups, possibly higher prices, the requirement for vaccinations, more requirements for registrations ahead of time to go into sites are things I think we expect to see on the ground. The other thing we're thinking about is how to expand our virtual pilgrimage offerings. The reason I'm here today is because we had a group that was supposed to go to Canterbury in December, and their trip, of course, was canceled December of 2020. And they wanted to figure out how to do it virtually. And I had never done a virtual pilgrimage before, but we said, hey, let's figure it out. So we did a 6-session virtual pilgrimage where we had live speakers or guests from the UK, including Reverend Jonathan Evans from St. Martin in the Fields. And each of those guests, so we visited with someone from the British Pilgrimage Trust. We visited with Westminster Abbey, with St. Martin in the Fields. We visited kind of back across the pond. We visited with folks from Plymouth in Massachusetts and the Wampanoag Nation to think about those pilgrims and what pilgrimage meant to them. And then we went to Reading in England to visit the museum there that has a replica of the Bayeux Tapestry. And then we finished in Canterbury last Sunday. So it was really cool. Each session was about an hour and a half. Our guest was with us for about an hour, and then we did some breakout groups so that there was a sense of community among the group. The challenge was scheduling. So they wanted to meet either on the weekend or in the evening, and that means evening here is the middle of the night over there. So we had to do a little bit of juggling to sort the schedule out, and Sunday afternoon seemed to work well. But we're still not sure, what that might look like going forward. If I'm doing, for us, I think it feels like it would be a little easier if we could pre-record some of the sessions so that we wouldn't have to worry about the timing quite as much. And then also we could show them to we could use them in other contexts as well. So we as a company are thinking about adding virtual pilgrimage as one of our educational resources. So for all of the groups that travel with us, we provide them with a series of short articles, usually about 4 pages, that introduce pilgrimage in general, connect the Bible with whatever area we're visiting, or the religious history of the areas we're visiting, or social and political issues in the area that we're visiting. And we, the pastor of the church can facilitate conversations around those articles. So now we're saying, I wonder if we could do some of these virtual pilgrimage type things before a trip goes, as a way to help educate the group, help whet people's appetites. I know with this Canterbury pilgrimage, this group is even more excited to travel now that they've done the virtual pilgrimage. So that may be a tool in our educational resources box. It is quite a bit of work to put together, so it's just a matter of figuring out what makes the most sense and what is most useful to our people. I think I've probably used most of my allotted time, but again, my company is Progressive Pilgrimage. I'm like Donald, I feel a little uncomfortable with the word company or business because it does feel like ministry to me. At the same time, it is also part of my livelihood, so I think I should be honest about that. And I have to say, St. Martin's in the Fields, you've done such a good job of bringing business, bringing some of the creativity and ingenuity of business into the way you have built your ministry there. And I appreciate that. So I think I'm learning from you a little bit. But we're Progressive Pilgrimage. We mostly work with pastors to organize something for their congregation. So we're not sort of creating a trip and advertising it to the general public. Although we do have 2 of those coming up in the next year. One is a civil rights trip here in the United States, and one is for the Passion Play in Oberammergau in Germany. And I'm calling that one part pilgrimage and part party because it's during Oktoberfest. I think that's all for me for now.
That's tremendous, Heather. Thank you so much for your input, and really fascinating. I absolutely love this idea of a posture, a way of being. Pilgrimage as a way of being. That's something we can explore together after this. But please can I remind all participants that we need your comments, we need your stories, your experiences, your questions, and we'll come to you shortly. But we turn now to Eugene, who is a member of our congregation at St. Martin in the Fields and has lots of wise words for us on pilgrimage. Over to you, Eugene.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, good afternoon, or good evening, or even good morning. I don't know whether it is something applied to you, but very happy to be involved and very happy to listen to what Donald and Heather said about the different pilgrimages. And I just want to show what I have done in this pilgrimage at the connection of St. Martin's. So let me have a quick start of what we are doing. So, as you said in the beginning, we talk about the annual pilgrimage from St. Martin's to Canterbury. It's an annual fundraising event for the charity, which is the connection of St. Martin's to help thousands of homeless or rough sleeping people. So this is a 30 years pilgrimage already. So this pilgrimage, we are doing the 74 miles journeys for 4 days. So each day we walk about 18.5 miles roughly. So we covering the most of the famous pilgrims ways in UK, in different towns and villages, and of course the lockdown ways to the Canterbury. So as we talked about before, that we got an average number each year 120 to 150 people. I must really proud to say that we also, in this group of people, we include some of the homeless clients in our charity, and also we involve the Sunday International Group guests from the church, which is the Asylum Seekers group in the church. So in these graphics, you can see our journey in artistic way from London to Canterbury, and you see that the stops all over the places, they offer us excellent hospitality in our journey from London to Canterbury. And this is the picture that I want to show you for the 2019 when we start in St. Martin's in the Field. So we got our charity representative and the church priest Sally to cut the ribbon to send us off. And the fourth day, we are going to the cathedral. This is in the crypt. We are doing the celebrating services in the crypt. Finally, we got a really important action that we will go to the cloister of the cathedral. Why we do it? Because we remember one of the vicars of St. Martin's. This is a Reverend Dick Shepherd to set up the homeless charity at the beginning many years ago, social care unit, and now become the connection at St. Martin's. So each year we go to his grave and say the remembrance words for Dick Shepherd. So this is our background and our history about the pilgrimage before the pandemic. So what happening for the 2020? So when the pandemic started, again, we can't really deal with the real pilgrimage. We try to think about another possible ways to host a similar events in the later summer. So we make a decision that we host a virtual pilgrimage in August 2020. So what happened that we asked people to walk as much as possible to achieve a target of 2,220 miles. Why this number is happening? Because last year is our 30th anniversary of the pilgrimage. Each pilgrimage we walk for 74 miles. So we are doing like 74 miles times 30. That means we try to achieve 2,220 miles. So in August, we try to ask people to walk as much as they can. And also we host a Zoom call for the pilgrims each week. And we want the pilgrims to share their experience. We also invite church leader, priests to say a prayer in each of the call, so that we, as a conclusion, to maintain the spirit of the pilgrimage. And also, as I said, this is a fundraising event for the connection at St. Martin's. So we did a lot of supporting social medias to update the status. For example, we got 170 more 4 miles club, so that we will say praise to people that they can achieve 74 miles and how much money they can raise to our charity. This is what we did in August last year. So on the last day of the virtual pilgrimage, that is, I remember it should be the 31st of August 2020, we got a celebrating Zoom call for all people to join in. So that is an amazing way to group the people together, although we can't really meet together. But it is surprisingly going well that we got Richard Carter, the priest from St. Martin's, to give us a video how we start the journey from the St. Martin's. And then we got the dean for the cathedral in Canterbury to say to us how it's important the people is walking and achieve their spiritual goal through the pilgrimage journey. So it is amazing 2 meditating videos that we can show in the Zoom, so that we got a meditating contents in the Zoom call. So as a result, we got 44 pilgrims to walk 2,833 miles, which is far over our target, which is very grateful to what we do at this particular moment. So how about this year? So this year we all know that it is not absolutely normal at the moment. So we are not holding the 4 days weekend at the moment, but we ask people to walk our iconic figure 74 miles again throughout the August, similar what we did for the last year. But on the other hand, we try to make things normal by time to time. So we will organize a 1-day walk on the 30th of August. That is Monday, the bank holiday in UK. So we are walking from Charing in Kent to Canterbury Cathedral. This is the last day, what we did traditionally throughout the weekend. So we really want to try to test the temperature of the water, so that in this pandemic period of time, we try to see how we can do it in a safe way and in a suitable way. So in this one-day pilgrimage, we will try our best to do as an outdoor event. So make sure to minimize all indoor situation, and also we try to apply all the rules and guidelines from the government to keep all the people safe, so that people can enjoy in it. And of course, as our organizing the event, all the PPEs, we are thinking through it, so make sure that we are providing it and pilgrims can have some of them when they are needed on that day. In our pilgrimage, in the weekend, actually, in the past, we provide all the food, and also we rent the church and hall to provide to people to sleep. But now this year we are doing the one-day event, so we try our best to follow the most updated guidelines for the food and hygiene. So, for example, we may need to hire the professional catering suppliers, or if actually in our route there are many local supports that they want to offer us food and drinks in the past. So I am the one who try to discussing with them how we can do it in a safe and most comfortable way, so that they can provide us the food and drink, and also pilgrims are safe, are also feeling safe to have it. Also, one thing, I am really proud of the Canterbury Cathedral, that we are trying our best to hold a celebrating service no matter in the crypt of the cathedral or in the cloister, so that we can still celebrating our pilgrimage, claiming the victory. And also we try to make sure that no matter the pilgrims are walking to the cathedral, and they are walking no matter they are virtual pilgrims to join the celebrating service via Zoom or via any live stream platform. So this is the link that we are receiving registration and the details for this year's pilgrimage at this particular moment. So when we think about in the future, well, we are still hoping all the things will come to normal. So we got a great hope that we will hold a 4-day pilgrimage from London to Canterbury in our normal weekend, that is the second bank holiday weekend in May 2022. And we already set up a new guidelines and new plan that we try to bring on more health and safety policy applies to the weekend, so that we want to make a safe pilgrimage weekend and for all the pilgrims, because I know that pilgrims joining our pilgrimage is very faithful and very enjoying this particular event. I can tell you one of our pilgrims, he joined us every year from the start of the beginning. That is really amazing. So that is something we really want to continue. And also lastly, we will continue to explore the better plans to organize the virtual pilgrimage. At this particular moment, last year we got 2 or 3 people. They are from the countries not in UK, so it is amazing. So we try to see if we can say to more people in the world, also supporting the connection at St. Martin's, and also support the ideas of pilgrimage to join us as a spiritual journey, or also a helping people journey for the homeless people. So that is what I think it is in my job to do at the moment. And I can say to you that I enjoy my job very much. So I really hope that it can be continued. So thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to talk to you later for any question or any discussion.
I can honestly say that the pilgrimage to Canterbury is the highlight of my year. It's the most intense experience of community you'll ever have, the most fascinating conversations that you can engage in with people from all walks of life, you know, who you often just walk past in the street perhaps, but suddenly you find yourself on the road walking together, sharing deeply, sharing just human beings on the road. And that's a very important part of pilgrimage, isn't it? It's the place. It's the place, the sacredness of one another's presence and the sacredness of place. And I'm really fascinated, Donald, Heather, and Eugene, how you have managed to maintain the importance of that sacredness of place whilst doing your virtual work online in the past year. How can we integrate that? I think some of you have touched upon it, but I'd love to hear any more insights as to how doing virtual work has actually helped you to maintain that sense of sacredness of space. Who would like to? Heather, would you like to unmute, and then Donald? Heather.
Sure. You know, I'm not sure if we have managed to maintain that sacredness of space. I mean, we had an incredible virtual tour of Westminster Abbey, but I don't think it takes your breath away the same way walking into the space does, right? So something about the physicality of a place is definitely lost on a virtual pilgrimage. But I will say, I think we increased the sacredness of the community, the sense of the sacred community and the people that occupy those sacred spaces. You know, sometimes when you go into a place, you can be so caught up with the place that you don't think about who's the priest here every Sunday and who are the congregants who sit in these pews, and, oh, do I need to pray here? Because you're so busy taking pictures, right? And so I think with our virtual pilgrimage, the way we did it, we really felt connected with the people who were leading this virtual pilgrimage. The space was in the background, but people were so energized about the innovative ministry at St. Martin in the Fields. And they really loved talking with the person from the Old Way at the British Pilgrimage Trust. Even though we didn't get to walk on the Old Way, they can't wait to meet her. More than they want to walk that path, they want to meet her. So Dawn is her name. And so I think that to me is something that is enriched by virtual pilgrimage, that the people are more spotlighted than the place. And I wouldn't stop doing, you know, in-person pilgrimages because of that, but I appreciate that we weren't so busy gawking at the spaces that we missed the people.
I love that. So the relationships can be deepened, can be maintained online, but the place sort of slightly goes into the background as we think of it or see it through photographs and so on. That's beautifully put. Thank you. Donald, did you want to say anything in response?
Right. Thank you, Catherine. I'd love to say how impressed I am and to applaud Eugene and his work and his team's work in moving from 2019 to 2020 to 2021 and then into next year. Really remarkable. And to continue the ministry, to continue the funding, to find new ways to include people, not to just shut everything down, but rather to be more creative. I see hybrid opportunities in pilgrimage arising in this country, and I'm sure in other countries. Those churches and cathedrals that were not online before and came online in 2021, 2020, will certainly continue an online presence in worship on Sundays and at other times. So we have this hybrid thing moving forward. I wonder, for me, in this meeting, this gathering today, the scriptural image of being built up as living stones into a holy temple just refreshed itself in my heart, because for Heather, for Eugene, for others on pilgrimage, for those in this gathering, we have a new opportunity to explore this image of being living stones, being built into an organic holy temple with the breath of God, the breath of the Spirit, infusing and engaging and inspiring each of us. The Holy Spirit is, for me, very much a feminine being of the Trinity, and it seems to me that we're called into this living stones notion. Just briefly, I noted Jonathan Evans' remarks suggesting that the way of the cross, the Via Dolorosa, the stations of the cross, have been and in the future may indeed be much more not merely symbolic of the pilgrimage walk of the way of the cross, but actually be shareable through Zoom, through prayer, through Spirit, that the way of the cross can be something that much more brings us together as pilgrims. And to echo what Heather says, there are ways that we can find to care for each other and to travel together, to be in worship and praise together. My notion of eternity, we have to measure things in time zones and on calendars and in lines of history. If God's eternity really is eternity, then for me, God isn't limited by our notions of time and place, and being only in one time and place. Through pilgrimage, through prayerful engagement, even through Zoom gatherings as a component of it, we really can take hold more of this notion that we are walking in God's reign in an eternal procession and pilgrimage of faith. Someone the other day reminded me that life on earth is but a school for the larger life in eternity. I'm, as you can see, I'm very excited and animated by what I've heard here today. I did post in the chat so that people could pick up the link later, the link to another St. Martin's in the Fields, this being the Episcopal Church in Columbia, South Carolina, which last Advent did post and design and enlivened an Advent Holy Land pilgrimage. So another way, Heather has described some, Eugene has described some, St. Martin's in the Fields in the States really had a wonderfully large response from people all over the world joining them in an Advent pilgrimage. And so we'll see what comes in the future. I think the Spirit is showing once again that every now and then we feel a door is being shut, that the pandemic somehow shut the front doors of our churches and our homes and was going to keep us captive. And instead, the Spirit opens new doors and windows and opportunities through Hard Edge and through other organizations and ministries, so that indeed the Spirit is helping us co-create these new opportunities, blowing in new notions of spiritual formation and care for each other, and also care that no one be left behind. There really are ways that some people who couldn't travel because of physical or financial limitations now can be a part of a community in a new way, and that really warms my heart.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much, Donald. I'm thrilled to see some great questions are coming through, and we're going to be turning to you all shortly to hear those. But can I just say how inspired I was at the idea of using virtual pilgrimages as an educational tool. That would just triggered so many thoughts for me, because often even going on a trip to Israel, Palestine, you can sometimes feel like consumers, like tourists, but actually the idea of immersing yourself into the experience even before you get there, that for me excites me to deepen that idea of being living stones, as Donald so beautifully put. So yeah, well, thank you for that insight. Really helpful to kind of have an educational before and after, and how you integrate it into your life when you get home as a way of life, which is excellent. Eugene, did you want to make any further comment before we go to the questions in the chat?
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting that because I am really honored that I work for this particular pilgrimage, and I can know a lot of pilgrims. I can say to you that I think in our group about 30 to 40 people, they are regular pilgrims each year for this particular pilgrimage. They are really treasure this trip each year spiritually. They may be not Christian. Some of them they are not Christian, but they are treasuring the opportunities to come together to do something, and also they are fundraising for the homeless people in London. So that is doing they are doing it in a great cause. And also for last year, well, the statistics, the numbers told us that we got fewer people to join us for the virtual pilgrimage, but they are really keen to do something, to walk, to do their pilgrimage meditation in their own time to achieve something. So I think no matter we are doing the in-person pilgrimage in the future or alongside with a virtual pilgrimage, we are still having some people eager to do it, and do it for a great cause. No matter it's a charity event, or no matter they want to build up the spiritual growth. That is one thing that they really want to do something like that.
That's tremendous, Eugene. Thank you for that. I'm not going to turn. Jonathan, did you want to say anything more about your point, just to revisit that Stations of the Cross, or do you think we've answered your question there? Perhaps you can share some of your experience.
Well, I think Donald's given an excellent response to that. It was just I think kind of a good principle when we're in a situation that we kind of don't understand, as we have been with the pandemic, and where everything is new, is to look back within our own tradition and see whether there's learning from the past. And it does seem to me that the Stations of the Cross were, to some extent, created as an equivalent to walking the Via Dolorosa in person. So there is a sense in which they are a virtual experience. So I'd be interested whether Heather, with her experience of organising a small number of virtual pilgrimages and trying to build worship and prayer into that experience, whether you see learning from something like the Stations of the Cross.
I would just agree. And definitely it is, the Stations of the Cross and Labyrinths are both virtual pilgrimages. Labyrinths were also designed for people to physically walk when they couldn't walk all the way to Jerusalem or to Rome. So I think we do have those things in our congregations now at Stations of the Cross I don't think you have them in Episcopal churches and Anglican churches, do you?
We do in a number. I mean, particularly with Anglo-Catholic.
Okay. Most Episcopal churches in the U.S. don't still have Stations of the Cross. Our Catholic churches do, of course. But so you have them right there in your building, right? You can invite people. You could set it up where it doesn't have to be entirely virtual. You could put, if you have the Stations of the Cross on the walls in your sanctuary, you could put materials there where people could come and do them anytime. You could have a journal where people could sign and leave a note for other pilgrims who come by. So it could be something you do physically, but you're connected virtually with others who are also doing it. The other thing I would recommend is a book by Betty Jane Bailey called Living Stones. And she has in there the script from a BBC broadcast, I think in the late 80s, that is a Stations of the Cross meditation that all come from Palestinian Christians. And so it really makes those Stations of the Cross contemporary to the people who live in the Holy Land today, 3 decades ago. But I really love it. That's what we use when we walk the actual Stations of the Cross. And I think it could be really powerful to use even on a virtual pilgrimage around the Stations of the Cross. I'll see if I can find a link and drop it in the chat if anybody's interested.
Thank you. I'd love to turn now to Arwen to just share some of her experiences of organising pilgrimages in her local church. Arwen.
Oh, thank you. So I arrived here about 2 years ago, and my predecessor was really big on taking everyone away. I mean, they have been everywhere, the Holy Land, all over the place. And so it was a bit of a hard act to follow. So I was sort of building up my confidence. We went to Canterbury Cathedral, and that went very well indeed. We said Mass down in the crypt, and it was really amazing. And then, of course, COVID happened, and we were all planning to go to Rome. But I'm aware that I have a very pilgrimy type parish. So I've been looking at ways in which we could still meet that need. And bizarrely, all we did was we walked. So I've got 2 churches, but actually never the twain shall meet. And we pilgrimaged from one church over the fields to the other church. And it was remarkably powerful. We stopped halfway. I did a proper sort of John Wesley itinerant preacher style blessing upon the benefice, standing on a rock in a gate. But it was so fantastic. And what was really revealing, I think, to all of us, we spent 3 hours in each other's company, sort of walking big circular route, was that actually it didn't matter that we weren't in Rome, because actually that sense of pilgrimage and intention to pray and to observe the sacred nature of our locality, and whether that had been particularly heightened because of this past year where everybody is suddenly a lot more appreciative of where they are, I don't know, but it was really quite special. Everybody was absolutely buzzing, and we observed this amazing organic movement between people. You know, if you're in a church hall having a coffee morning, you have to be really intentional about going to speak to other people, and it didn't happen like that. Everybody just moves and speaks to another person and moves about. It was just really, really holy. So we're now going to just go exploring churches that are literally down the road, and we're just going to do a whole load of big circular routes, but actually really connect with those churches, not just sort of observe them from a historical sense, but actually touch the stones and actually pray in the building. And so it's been a real eye-opener for us actually as to what pilgrimage is really about. Is it about how far away you go, or is it actually about the intention with which you travel, and therefore actually where you go is a bit less important?
That's absolutely tremendous. Oh, and it reminds me of that wonderful phrase, ambula salulant, or it is solved by walking. You know, that wonderful idea of walking together is just walks out differences, you know,
well,
and brings
you know, that's, and it has helped to resolve a bit of an issue that we've got, which is that we've grown over this last year through all the online worship. So we've welcomed a huge number of new people, and it's been really disruptive because we don't have any social life. So new people haven't been able to meet old people, and there's been a real difficulty with this. But actually these walks, we had about 30 people coming to do it with us. And actually that mixing and that integration began very beautifully, you know, through the work of the Spirit, really. It was fab. Yeah.
Any responses to that from the panelists?
I saw Arwen's note in the chat, and I'm so excited that you're doing that. And it's something that I've dreamed of doing with my congregation. We're located in a corner of our city that is, I guess you would say, depressed. Most of our neighbors are, many of the buildings around us are like single room occupancy group homes, and we have 2 homeless shelters in the neighborhood and Salvation Army. And then on the other side is sort of like a really busy intersection that isn't very pedestrian friendly. And I felt like we need to know our neighborhood better, and we need to be in pilgrimage just even in the 4 blocks around our church to pray for with and for our neighbors. And I know of a group that's doing that. It's connected with Duke University in Durham, actually. And I don't know if Donald is familiar with that or not. It's called a pilgrimage. Let me get the name just right. A pilgrimage of pain and hope. And the idea was that as Durham was gentrifying, these more middle class, upper class, mostly white folks were totally out of touch with some of the other communities in Durham. And the pilgrimage was designed to connect neighbors who might not otherwise connect. And it's just absolutely beautiful. And I know for me, in the United States, at least, I think with the racial justice issues that we're dealing with, pilgrimage is a great way to do those, to confront those together.
I think I want to add one thing, just like, I think not only for the pilgrims is himself or herself get connected to different people. In my experience, actually, because I organized the 4-day pilgrimages, that we need a lot of local support, and actually the local communities playing a very important roles for the pilgrims, because they are having such like a DNA for themselves, that they are born to be helping to joining the pilgrimage in this way. So they are also very important to, especially to my pilgrimage. I got something like 13, each day we got 3 to 5 local communities to help us. So it's something like 16 or 17 communities. They are really grateful to us.
Tremendous. Thank you, Eugene. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The people you meet en route make the pilgrimage, don't they? They're crucial for the whole success of the route. But let's turn now to Sandy Forsyth. Thank you, Arwen, for sharing your stories. Sandy, would you like to ask your question to Eugene?
Yes, thank you. I'm a minister in Edinburgh in Scotland, and shortly to go on a pilgrimage with very limited numbers, in fact, possibly just myself, due to the COVID regulations, to Iona, which will be a 4-day journey from Argyll on the St. Conan's Way and across the Ross of Mull to Iona. So with very limited numbers, what I'm intending to do is to post every day, and to post worship material, prayer material, reflections on the sites from St. Columba and others I'll be bypassing on the way. But I'm very conscious that there'll be the main body of people will not be with me, certainly this year. And I'm also conscious that post-pandemic, hopefully when we have larger numbers and might do something similar, there's always people who won't be able to walk with us through reasons of age or infirmity. So I'm just very interested in what we do to include them as virtual pilgrims while we walk, particularly this year, since it's going to be a very limited number, and maybe just one. What will I do? And I was wondering, from your experience in walking those 4 days, Eugene, are there particular things that you do every day that will communicate with those who may be at home that are following your progress, who want to engage as virtual pilgrims and want to be part of that pilgrimage experience, even though they cannot, for whatever reason, walk with you?
Okay, well, thank you. That is good. Well, I think last year is a really different year for me to deal with all the things, because normally I just really busy on that 4 particular days, running around the places that I need to deal with the food and drink or something like that. But this last year is quite different. So basically, what I need to be engaging them is make sure that they are really communicating with, at least with me. And also, as I said before, each week I will organize the Zoom group for people to share how they feel in their walking and how they experience in their walking. So the Zoom call is very important. But on the other hand, I also set up a different kind of social media like a Facebook group and the Twitters, so that people can share what they are experiencing, and so that people can support each other. Even though in the Zoom call, although not all the people are really Christians, but we try to pray together, to share scriptures together. This is a main thing. I think we can hold them together, so that I think in terms of the virtual pilgrimage, we need to deal with the regular contact with each pilgrims, so that make them feel that we are all together, no matter where we are and what we do, so that we can support each other. And I think lastly, the most important thing is the last day, the celebrating service, which is, I think, is a very good conclusion for all people. They have contributed what they have done all over the month. So this is our recognition to them that they contribute a lot. And also, I think that they also spiritually revived in many different stages. I think that is what I can offer at the moment.
Yeah, I was actually part of a virtual pilgrimage across the Isle of Mull to get to Iona this Easter as part of Scottish Cross. Normally it's during Holy Week, a group of us, I mean, I haven't done it for about 5 years, but we carry across the Isle of Mull, and we arrive on Mull together. And then you have that very intense and wonderful experience of living together for a week. But of course, this year we couldn't do that. But we still on Zoom shared stations, stories, reflections from our lives that you bring to that walk. And I would really recommend you getting a Steadicam if you haven't got one, to walk with Zoom on your Steadicam. We ran a silent retreat at St. Martin in the Fields in February, walking through the streets of London with a Steadicam at night, and it was just very powerful to pray the streets of London through the Steadicam, speaking into the camera. So as much live as possible is really, really effective.
I was wondering, Sandy, as I was listening to your plans and to Eugene, and now Catherine, if asking people to commit to be present at a certain time every day for those 4 days, I think one of the challenges of virtual pilgrimage is people can sort of half engage, because they don't have to quit their whole lives for 4 days or 10 days or whatever. So it's a little harder to carve out the sacred time. And I wonder if you asked people specifically to commit for these next 4 days for an hour to clear their schedules and to be present and attentive, to really treat it as a pilgrimage. Because if they were walking with you, they would have to leave everything behind for 4 days. So maybe asking people to be intentional about making that commitment would be a way to have that live engagement that Catherine and Eugene, I think, are both saying is really important.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. Because the enthusiasm is certainly there. And if it wasn't for COVID, we would have a good group of people going. So there's a group of people who want to engage, but that's very helpful in both your suggestions of ways of making sure that they engage at regular times, or including plenty of live material where they would have been walking. Excuse me. So thank you to you all.
Great. We have Deb, I think, has a question about resources. Would you like to ask your question, Deb?
Yeah,
thank you.
And I moved, I'm a curate, and I moved into my curacy house in the very beginning of July. So between the two lockdowns we had here in Kent, as it happens. So in terms of getting to know my congregations, I ought to say I'm in a benefice of 8 churches, so there's quite a lot of congregations. I've not had that as an opportunity. I've not, we didn't have any church services before we went into our second lockdown. In church services, they were all online. And I'm just interested as to whether anyone's aware of any literature, any written material or articles or research into differing attitudes towards online retreats and pilgrimages compared to physical retreats and pilgrimages. Just, as a point for my studies, but also in terms of being able to prepare congregational members for whichever aspect of pilgrimage they're going to explore, whether we look at it differently if we're going to do an online pilgrimage. I think Heather was just saying, we don't have to give up our entire lives if we're doing an online pilgrimage. We still get to stay at home and cook our own meals and look after the dog and all the rest of it. So does our preparation then necessarily change? And really, is anyone aware of anything any written guidance, anyone that's written any books during the course of pandemic that can help sort of untangle some of this?
Thoughts, folks. You might be the one writing the book, Deb, at this rate. It's early days. Somebody will be on the case, but no books might come to mind. But how about the others? Heather, you've mentioned one book in the chat.
I don't have a book to recommend. We put together a short article on preparing for your virtual pilgrimage. I'd be happy to, I don't have it on a website, so we just sent it out by email as a PDF, but I'd be happy to share it and see if it's useful. It's tricky. It really is tricky, I think, and I think a virtual pilgrimage is just very different from an in-person one, but I'll share what I have, and Catherine, maybe you can send it out to the people who registered for this event. Is that good?
Yeah, of course. That's a good idea.
We use 4 questions to help people get in the mindset of pilgrimage, and I do think you can use them for virtual or in-person pilgrimages. And one is about setting your intention. One is about what are you leaving behind? That even if you're doing a virtual pilgrimage, you're going to leave behind cooking dinner. Your spouse is going to take care of that. So, to acknowledge that you have to leave something behind even to do a virtual pilgrimage. Who is supporting you? So we use the, like medieval pilgrims had to get permission from their bishop or their feudal lord or whatever to go on pilgrimage. Maybe you don't need permission from somebody, but somebody is probably helping make your pilgrimage possible. And then who do you carry with you? So pilgrims always carry people in their hearts that can't physically make pilgrimage. So who is on your heart as you enter this pilgrimage, whether it's virtual or in real life? So what's your intention? What are you leaving behind? Who is supporting you? And what do you carry with you? Who do you carry with you? And I think those questions could inform a virtual or an in-person pilgrimage.
I think, Katrin, did you want to say anything, or I think you've said your point, which is fantastic about the art in your church. Perhaps we could then move to Jonathan, if he's still with us.
So this was a question that was more about in-person pilgrimages, particularly in the Holy Land. So the only opportunity I've had to go to the Holy Land was with a group of Christians, Jews, and Muslims through the Three Faiths Forum in the UK, that was an incredibly rich experience because of the debate and discussion that was constantly going on within the group about interfaith relationships and also about the current situation and experience within Israel itself. So I just wondered to what extent those kinds of conversations and encounters sort of feature within the experience of Donald and Heather with the trips that they've made to the Holy Land in the past.
Right. If I may, I think Heather's spoken to this a bit, and I'm sure has more to contribute. When we go, for instance, from the States to pilgrimage in the Holy Land, we always let St. George's Cathedral, Jerusalem, know we're coming. For instance, we put together 3 groups on one Sunday morning, and we're going to go to Eucharist at the what I call the early Christian service at 8 o'clock at the cathedral, and that service is typically in the chapel. Well, it would seat about 12, and we had 56. So had we not let them know we were coming, it would have been difficult to provide hospitality. So simple things like that, being in conversation with those who are eager to be hospitable and to extend hospitality. I also am a member of the Order of St. John, which has eye hospitals in Jerusalem and in Palestinian territories and mobile clinics. And so there's a way to be in touch there. I think one of the deepest learning experiences in the Holy Land and Palestinian territories, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, and further out, has to be the recognition of the present day contemporary stresses and strains between Christians, Muslims, Jews, and the non-religious in, let's just say, Jerusalem as one. It's always important with whatever size group, I think, to try to build dialogue and conversation, discussion. We try to do that in the evenings with meals together and with forums together. We'll have a religious Jewish person leader and a Christian leader from Jerusalem speak to us. We try to get to organize having dinner with Palestinian families in Bethlehem. And for all of us, for me included, that the first time I did that, it illustrates how terribly difficult it is to be a Christian in Bethlehem and try to earn a living and try to live in context, because of course you're behind a wall. So I think I think now, particularly after the most recent conflict, it's incumbent upon tour hosts and pilgrim leaders and other religious leaders to do all we can to help our pilgrims understand how remarkable it is that to the degree in which Jews, Muslims, and Christians do live side by side and get along together, and tragically, when that breaks down. That is, I can't imagine taking pilgrims into the Holy Land this year or next and not having someone of real repute speak to the issues of the conflict that is now under a peace accord, and we hope that holds. To say it another way, how many voices, how many informed religious voices might we hear from to help us understand and grapple with and pray for peace in that conflicted land, whether it's on the Temple Mount or in Jerusalem or in Palestinian territories. It really has to be part of our pilgrimage experience that we as pilgrims wrestle with the difficulties that those who live there and want to worship there and want to live together in peace. We really have a responsibility to try to wrestle with that and to hear from informed voices. I certainly don't mean by that we would be provocative or we would provoke argumentative situations. Rather, we would come as pilgrims in prayer, and we would seek to understand, and we would seek to become peace builders. Just to go away from Jerusalem and Bethlehem just a moment, if folks in this gathering here are not familiar with Magdala.org, Magdala is that village, the fishing village, which was lost for so many centuries and has been rediscovered on the shores of Galilee. And the same Catholic organizations that run Notre Dame Conference Center outside of Newgate in Jerusalem are building ministries there at Magdala on the shores of Migdal, on the shores of the Galilean Sea. And what really captures me, as we say in the States, I can't help being a Southern white male Protestant. It's just some of the baggage I have. But to go to Magdala and realize that at that center, which has a recovered first century synagogue in which I believe Jesus would have certainly taught, and the hometown of Mary Magdalene, there is an emerging and growing and flourishing women's leadership ministry. So another website to go to, if you're not familiar with magdala.org, it will open up as a retreat center, as a pilgrim center, as a place to stay, as a place to worship, and to learn more about women's ministries in the first century and in the 21st. That's rather an interjection on my part, and I'd better be quiet now and let others have a go at it.
I'll chime in terms of how we sort of approach the issue that Jonathan mentioned. For me, from the very beginning of starting Progressive Pilgrimage, it was important to hear from different voices, both sort of informed voices, as I think that was the phrase Donald used, but also just regular people, the regular experience of everyday folks. So for our Holy Land tours, I think one of the things we do that's different than other tour providers is that we don't use one guide for the whole trip. Our tours consistently, we haven't done a single one not like this. We use 3 different guides, and not all at the same time. So we want each guide to be able to feel free to speak in their own voice and their own perspective. And so we spend usually 2.5 days with a Jewish guide. He identifies as Orthodox Jewish, not ultra Orthodox. So he, dresses in sort of modern clothes, but he keeps the Sabbath. He keeps kosher. He's very dedicated to the synagogue, his synagogue. He's an American, actually, an expat to Israel. He's been there like 25 years now. So we spend about 2.5 days with him. And our guides know that our groups are usually interested in the politics of the region. So we ask our guides to share their own personal views, not to, feel like they have to hide those things. And then we spend, depending on the length of the trip, 2 or 2.5, about 2 days usually, with a younger guide who is Arab, Israeli, Muslim, who is not super devout, but still practices his Muslim faith, but he's 28, he's a young guy, he's married, just had his 2nd kid, and he lives in Bethlehem. His wife has a Jewish a Jerusalem residency card, so she could live in Jerusalem, but he can't. So they live together in Bethlehem, but she has to maintain some kind of residency in Jerusalem so that she doesn't lose her residency card. So you hear his story and you start to understand what it's like to be a Muslim Arab young man in Bethlehem. And that makes you ask different questions about what you heard from our Jewish guide earlier, right? You may not get to ask those questions to the Jewish guide, but you have to hold those things in tension now. And then we get to the Galilee, and we use a guide in the Galilee who is Arab, but an Israeli citizen, and a woman who's not married. So she just brings this whole other world of experience as an Arab person who benefits from citizenship in Israel. She's an Orthodox Christian, so she brings a Christian voice to the conversation. And again, you hear these 3 perspectives we don't try to reconcile them for people. I think for us, the goal is to let people hear 3 different voices and just hold that. And these guides are awesome. Our groups fall in love with these 3 people and they don't know what to do. And I think that's good. And I think we need to learn how to do that in the United States, especially with the political divisions we have in our country and the racial tensions we have in our country, how to say, this is my story and this is your story, and they're not the same, and that's okay. And I don't have to figure out how to make them the same. And so I hope that improving civic dialogue is one of the outcomes of the pilgrimages we do in the Holy Land, and we actually do it in Northern Ireland too. There's some groups there doing great, continuing the peacemaking work there, and we love hearing from them too. So that's our approach, is not to try to reconcile different stories, but just to let them stand and we trust that our travelers are smart enough to take all of that and process it.
That's tremendous. Heather, thank you so much. I think so much of pilgrimage is actually about holding the tension and living with the tension on the road together. So in whatever context that is, whether it's locally in our parishes or whether it's walking to Iona with all that's going on within us, or indeed in the Holy Land with such a rich encounters that you've both just described. So thank you for your insights. And sadly, my friends, time is up, and I would love to have gone to Vanessa, but unfortunately we're already over time. And I would just love to end by saying a huge thank you to Donald, to Heather, and to Eugene for stimulating such rich reflection for us this evening. Or this morning for some of you, wherever you are. Certainly for us, it's later evening. So a huge thank you to each one of you. And I know participants that are here, if you want to follow up any of these conversations, then they'd all be very open to further conversations, or we can network you up. So do get in touch if you would like to further the conversations together. But there is lots more rich program taking place with HeartEdge. So do look at our Facebook page and our website, and do join us again. It's been wonderful to be with you this evening. But on behalf of everyone, thank you, Heather, Donald, and Eugene.
Thank you very much. Blessings.
Thank you.
Blessings to everyone. Eugene, I just can't wait to hear more about the pilgrimage to Canterbury, and I may join virtually next time.
Let's do it. Thank you.